The great hall of Proxima Station buzzed with nervous energy. Representatives from across the galaxy sat in their floating chairs, each one shaped for their different bodies. Some had scales, others had feathers, and a few glowed with their own inner light. But they all shared the same worried look in their eyes. Ambassador Veltar held the small crystal in his thin gray hands. The crystal was old, very old. 300 years had passed since it was first sent across the galaxy. Now, in this empty human sector of the station, he was about to read its message again. "Council members," Veltar began, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. "We gather today to discuss the human territories. As you know, these lands have been dark and silent for 3 centuries. The crystal began to glow as Veltar activated it. A hologram peered above the device. It showed a human in military clothes, his face tired and sad. The recording was old and grainy, but the words were clear. "To all species of the galaxy," the human said. "I am Admiral James Morrison of the Terran Federation. Our empire is ending, not through defeat, but through choice. We leave you with this warning. Do not rouse humanity now that your empire is gone. This message is not a threat. It is protection. Remember these words." The hologram faded, leaving the council in silence. Many of the beings had heard this message before, but it still sent chills through their bodies. Commander Zekthal slammed his massive fist on his chair's arm. The sound rang through the hall like thunder. His species, the hegemony, were warriors by nature. They had thick, armored skin and eyes like burning coals. "This is foolish talk," Zekthal growled. 300 years have passed. 300 years. If humans were still alive, where are they? Their worlds are empty. Their ships are gone. Their cities stand like tombs. Elder Kristen, whose people looked like walking trees, spoke in a voice like wind through leaves. "Commander, my people remember the human wars. We fought beside them and against them. Their power was beyond understanding. Perhaps the warning should be heeded? Power?" Zekthal laughed, but the sound held no joy. "Where is this power now? I see empty space where their empire once stood. I see worlds waiting to be claimed. I see technology waiting to be taken." The debate had been going on for months. Some council members wanted to stay away from human space. They remembered stories their grandparents told about human battles. About ships that could destroy planets. About warriors who never gave up, even when facing impossible odds. But others, led by Zekthal, saw opportunity. The human territories held resources beyond counting. Rare metals, energy sources, and technology that could advance any species by thousands of years. Veltar looked around the chamber. "The question before us is simple. Do we honor the warning of a dead empire, or do we claim what has been abandoned?" A small creature with large dark eyes raised a tentacle. "What if they are not dead? What if they are sleeping?" "Sleeping?" Zekthal roared. "For 300 years? No species sleeps that long. The humans are gone. Their empire fell, just like all empires fall. Now we must decide if we are brave enough to take what they left behind." Dr. Malik, a scientist from the Crystal Collective, projected data into the air. Charts and graphs showed the human territories in detail. Our long-range sensors detect strange energy patterns in human space. Not random decay, but organized activity, as if something is maintaining their worlds. "Automated systems," Zekthal said with a wave of his hand. "Nothing more. Machines following old programs. We can shut them down and claim what we want." "But what if Admiral Morrison was right?" asked Elder Creston. "What if the warning was real?" Zekthal stood up, his massive frame casting a shadow across the chamber. "Then we will deal with whatever we find. The hegemony has grown strong in these 3 centuries. Our fleets could conquer the old human empire twice over. The vote was close. Species that remembered the humans voted to stay away. Younger races, hungry for expansion, voted to explore. In the end, greed won over caution. The motion passes, Veltar announced sadly. Salvage operations in former human territory are authorized. May the ancestors forgive us. As the council members filed out, many whispered among themselves. The older races shared worried glances. They remembered stories from the war years. Stories of human ships that appeared out of nowhere. Stories of human soldiers who fought impossible battles and won. But the younger species were excited. They saw only opportunity. The human territories were vast, stretching across hundreds of star systems. There were worlds rich with rare elements. Space stations the size of moons. Technology that could change everything. Commander Zekthul gathered his officers after the vote. They met in his private chamber, a room decorated with weapons from a dozen different wars. Prepare the fleets, he ordered. We start with the outer systems. Small operations at first. Test the waters. Sir, one of his younger officers asked, what if the warning was real? What if something is still out there? Zekthul picked up an ancient human weapon from his collection. It was a simple projectile gun, primitive by galactic standards. But it was perfectly made, each part crafted with impossible precision. I fought humans once in the border skirmishes, he said quietly. They were strong, yes, but they were just another species. They bled. They died. They made mistakes. He set the weapon down carefully. Whatever they were, they are gone now, and we will take what they left behind. Outside Proxima Station, the first hegemony scout ships began their journey toward human space. Their crews were excited, thinking of the riches they would find. None of them noticed the small probe that detached from the station's hull. It was no bigger than a person's hand, made of materials that bent light around it. The probe watched the hegemony ships leave, recorded their course, and began its own journey. Deep in the darkness between stars, ancient sensors detected the probe's signal. For the first time in 3 centuries, something stirred in the void. The humans had left warnings for good reason. Soon, the galaxy would learn why. Captain Mordek stared at the view screen as his ship approached the edge of human space. He had expected to find dead zones, empty space filled with floating debris from a fallen civilization. Instead, he saw something that made his blood run cold. The border was marked by a line of ancient satellites, each one the size of a building. They hung in perfect formation, their surfaces gleaming like they had been polished yesterday. Red lights blinked in slow, steady patterns along their hulls. Sir, his navigation officer called out, the satellites are scanning us. Scanning us? Mordek moved closer to the screen. But they should be dead. 300 years without maintenance should have destroyed them. The officer checked his instruments again. The scans are very advanced, sir. More detailed than anything we have. They are mapping every bolt, every wire in our ship. Mordek felt a chill run down his spine. The satellites looked like they were built yesterday, not centuries ago. Their design was simple but beautiful, with clean lines that seemed to flow like water. Take us past them, he ordered. Slowly. As the ship moved forward, the satellites did nothing to stop them. But Mordek could feel them watching. His ship's computers reported that the satellites were sending information somewhere, but they could not trace where it was going. The first human world they reached was called Haven. It had once been a farming colony, home to millions of people. Now, as they approached, their sensors showed something impossible. The planet was perfect. Cities stretched across the continents, their buildings reaching toward the sky. Streets were clean and well-maintained. Parks were green and lush. The oceans were crystal clear, and the air was pure. But there were no people. Sir, the sensor officer reported, I am reading power sources all across the planet. The cities are fully operational, but no life signs. No humans at all. Mordek ordered a landing team to investigate. They chose a city on the main continent, one that had clearly been important. As their shuttle descended, they could see vehicles moving through the streets below. Those are automated systems, the pilot explained. Maintenance robots keeping everything running. They landed in what appeared to be the city center. The buildings around them were beautiful, made of materials that seemed to glow with their own inner light. The streets were spotless. Flowers grew in perfect arrangements along the walkways. The landing team spread out, their weapons ready. But there was nothing to fight. The city hummed with quiet energy, but it was empty of all intelligent life. Lieutenant Varek entered what looked like a government building. The doors opened automatically as he approached. Inside, he found halls lined with artwork and strange machines that he could not identify. Captain, he reported over his communicator, this place is like a museum. Everything is preserved perfectly. But sir, the technology here is beyond anything we have ever seen. In another part of the city, Sergeant Talmer found a power station. The building was small, but the energy readings were enormous. Inside, a single device no larger than his fist generated enough power for the entire city. How is this possible? He whispered to himself. Back on the ship, Mordek received reports from teams across the planet. Every city was the same, perfectly maintained, fully operational, but empty. The humans had left behind a world that ran itself. Sir, his science officer called out, I am detecting something strange. The planet's orbital mechanics have been adjusted. What do you mean? The planet's rotation, its distance from the sun, even its magnetic field have all been fine-tuned. Someone has turned this entire world into a perfect environment. The weather patterns are controlled, the seasons are balanced. It is like they rebuilt the whole planet. Mordek felt his confidence beginning to waver. This was not what they had expected to find. The humans had not simply abandoned their worlds. They had left them as monuments to their power. Over the following weeks, the hegemony explored more human worlds. Each one told the same story. Perfect preservation, impossible technology, and no signs of the people who had created it all. On the world called Harmony, they found cities that seemed to be grown rather than built. The buildings were made of a substance that was part metal, part plant. They bent and swayed in the wind but were stronger than any armor. On New Geneva, they discovered factories that still produced goods, even though no one had operated them for 3 centuries. The machines built things that the hegemony could not identify. Beautiful objects that seemed to serve no purpose except to exist. But it was when they reached Earth that everything changed. The human homeworld hung before them like a blue jewel in space. It was exactly as the old records described it. Continents and oceans, clouds swirling in perfect patterns. 2 bright moons dancing around it in their ancient rhythm. Sir, the sensor officer announced, the planet shows signs of careful maintenance. The forests are healthy, the oceans are clean. Someone has been taking care of this world. As they moved into orbit, their sensors detected something that made no sense. Deep beneath the planet's surface were vast chambers and tunnels. Cities underground that were larger than anything on the surface. There are structures under the ocean floor, the science officer reported. Massive installations that go down for kilometers. And sir, they are powered. All of them. Mordek made the decision to establish a base on Earth's moon. The lunar surface showed signs of ancient human presence, sealed domes and underground facilities. But like everything else they had found, these installations appeared to be empty. As they set up their equipment on the moon's surface, something strange happened. The moment their drilling equipment touched the lunar rock, lights began to appear in the underground facilities. Systems that had been dark for centuries suddenly came to life. "Sir," one of his engineers called out over the radio, "the human installations are activating. We are not doing anything, but they are turning themselves on. Deep beneath the moon's surface, in chambers that had waited for 300 years, ancient computers received signals that they had been programmed to expect. The signals meant that non-human forces were disturbing human territory. The computers began to send messages, not through normal radio waves, but through methods that the hegemony did not understand. Quantum communication networks that traveled faster than light carried the news across the galaxy. In the empty space between stars, receivers that had floated silent for centuries began to pulse with data. Information flowed through networks that the galaxy had never detected. The message was simple and clear. The sleepers had been awakened. More single quotes. DEK stood on the moon's surface, looking down at Earth through his helmet's visor. The planet looked peaceful and beautiful, just as it had for millions of years. But something had changed. He could feel it in the air, see it in the way the ancient human facilities hummed with new energy. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we are receiving some kind of transmission, but it is not directed at us. It is going outward, toward the edge of the galaxy. Can we decode it?" "No, sir. It is using a communication method we have never seen before." "But sir, the transmission is very powerful. It could travel between galaxies." Mordek felt a chill that had nothing to do with the moon's cold surface. The warning had spoken of humanity's empire being gone. But what if their empire had not fallen? What if it had simply moved somewhere else? He looked up at the stars, wondering what they had awakened. The reports started small. Equipment failures that happened for no reason. Communication systems that stopped working, then fixed themselves before repair teams arrived. Tools that would not start in the morning but worked perfectly by afternoon. Commander Zekthul read through the incident reports from his flagship, the Devourer's Edge. His forces had been in human space for 2 months now, and the strange events were becoming more common every day. "This is nonsense," he growled to his second-in-command, Colonel Brechtal. "Our engineers are making excuses for their poor maintenance." But privately, Zekthul was beginning to worry. His troops were experienced warriors, not nervous recruits. They had fought in a dozen campaigns across the galaxy. They did not imagine things. On Kepler 442b, a mining operation was digging deep into the planet's crust, searching for rare minerals. The work was going well until they broke through into a chamber that should not have existed. Foreman Kralik was the first to enter the underground facility. His lights revealed walls covered in smooth panels that seemed to be made of liquid metal. The chamber stretched away into darkness, far larger than their scans had suggested. "Command," he called into his radio. "We have found something. A big room, maybe a whole complex. It looks like it was built, not natural." As his team spread out to explore, the wall panels began to glow. One by one, they came to life, displaying images and symbols that hurt to look at directly. Star maps appeared, showing the positions of fleets and planets across the galaxy. "Sir," one of his miners called out, "this display shows our ships. All of them. And it is showing them right now, not old information." Kralik moved closer to the display. The star map was incredibly detailed, showing not just where their ships were, but what they were doing, how many crew members they had, even what weapons they carried. "How is this possible?" he whispered. "This place has been sealed for centuries." Before anyone could answer, the displays went dark. The chamber returned to silence as if nothing had happened. But the message was clear. Something had been watching them. Similar incidents happened across human space. On New Terra, a hegemony research station found that their computers were being accessed by unknown sources. Files were copied and transmitted, but no one could trace where they were going. On Proxima 7, an entire hegemony base lost power for 3 hours. When the lights came back on, all of their classified military plans had been downloaded and deleted from their systems. The strangest incident happened on board the heavy cruiser Bone Crusher. Captain Veloc was reviewing patrol reports when his ship's computer began displaying information that should not exist. The screen showed detailed plans of human military installations. Not just the empty bases they had found, but active facilities. Hidden shipyards and asteroid belts. Manufacturing centers built inside hollow moons. Defense networks that stretched across multiple star systems. Computer, Veloc commanded. Where did this information come from? Source unknown, the computer replied. Data received through quantum communication channels. Quantum communication? We do not have that technology. Confirmed. Data received through unknown means. The information stayed on screen for exactly 1 minute, then vanished. When Veloc tried to access it again, the computer claimed no such files had ever existed. But the most disturbing report came from Captain Mordic on Luna Base. His excavation teams had found the entrance to a massive underground facility beneath the moon's surface. The tunnels went down for kilometers, branching into chambers large enough to hold entire cities. Commander, Mordic reported to Zechthel over the communication link. We have found something that changes everything. The humans did not just live on their worlds. They built vast installations underground. Cities, factories, maybe even shipyards. Are they operational? Zechthel asked. That is the problem, sir. They are all empty, but they are not dead. The moment we entered the facility, everything came to life. Lights, computers, manufacturing equipment. It is like the place was waiting for someone to arrive. As Mordic spoke, alarms began sounding on his base. His officers rushed to their stations, checking sensors and communication arrays. Sir, his sensor operator called out. I am reading energy spikes all across human space. Massive power surges coming from installations we did not know existed. On the main screen, dots of light began appearing throughout the human territories. Each dot represented a facility coming online after centuries of dormancy. Underground cities, hidden shipyards, defense stations that had been invisible to all scans. How many? Zechthel asked quietly. Thousands, sir. Maybe tens of thousands. They have been there all along waiting. In the space around Vega Prime, where the hegemony had established their largest mining operation, something new appeared on the sensors. A ship, but unlike anything in their database's dot, it was not large by military standards, about the size of a frigate. But its design was impossible. The hull seemed to bend and flow like water, and sensors could not get a clear reading of its composition. Sir, the sensor officer on the mining station reported, the vessel is approaching our position. But sir, it is not moving through space normally. It appears to be folding space around itself. Are there any life signs? Asked Station Commander Mortel. Unknown, sir. Our sensors cannot penetrate the hull. But sir, it is scanning us. The scans are more advanced than anything we have ever seen. The human ship moved slowly around the mining operation, its sensors examining every piece of equipment, every structure, every person. Then it did something that terrified the hegemony forces more than any weapon could have. Every piece of technology in the mining operation simply stopped working. Computers went dark. Vehicles would not start. Even simple tools like lights and communicators failed. The aliens found themselves stranded on the planet's surface with no way to call for help, but they were not harmed. The ship could have destroyed them easily, but instead it simply left them helpless. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the vessel vanished. Within hours, similar incidents were reported across human space. Hegemony forces found their technology failing without warning. Weapons would not fire. Ships could not start their engines. Communication systems went silent. The pattern was always the same. A mysterious ship would appear, scan the area, disable all alien technology, then disappear. The hegemony forces were left stranded but unharmed. Commander Zekthul received the reports with growing alarm. His invasion force was being neutralized without a single shot being fired. Worse, he had no idea how it was being done. "Sir," Colonel Brechtal said carefully, "perhaps we should consider withdrawing. The humans are clearly more advanced than we realized." "No," Zekthul snapped. "This is some kind of automated defense system. Ancient technology following old programs. We just need to find the control center and shut it down." But privately, he was beginning to doubt his own words. The responses were too precise, too intelligent. This was not the work of simple machines following old commands. In the deep space between galaxies, vast shapes that had been traveling for years received the activation signals. Ships larger than moons began to change course, turning toward their ancient home. But they were still far away, and the journey would take time. The immediate response came from much closer sources. Hidden throughout human space, construction facilities that had slept for 3 centuries began their work. Not building the ships that the galaxy remembered from the old human fleets, but something new. The first of these new vessels had already made contact with the invaders. More were being built every hour, using technologies that had been developed in secret during humanity's long exile. On Luna Base, Captain Mordek stood in the abandoned human command center, looking at displays that showed the entire galaxy. The information was current and complete, showing every ship, every planet, every military force in known space. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we are receiving a transmission. It is on an open channel, directed at all hegemony forces in human space. Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was human, but changed somehow. It sounded like many people speaking together, their words perfectly synchronized. "To all foreign forces in Terran territory," the voice said, "you have ignored our warning. You have disturbed our rest. But we do not wish to harm you. You have 24 hours to withdraw from our space. After that time, we will remove you ourselves. This is not a threat. It is information." The transmission ended, leaving silence in the command center. "Sir," the communications officer asked quietly, "what should we do?" Mordek looked at the displays showing the awakening human installations across the galaxy. Thousands of facilities coming online, building ships with technology that his people could not understand. "Prepare for evacuation," he said finally. "We are not equipped for this fight." Commander Zekthul stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the reports come in from across human space. His forces were being systematically isolated, their technology disabled, their operations shut down. But no one had been killed. No one had even been injured. "They are playing with us," he growled to Colonel Brechtal. "These humans think they can humiliate the hegemony without consequences." "Sir," Brechtal said carefully, "perhaps we should consider their offer. 24 hours to withdraw is generous, considering we invaded their territory." Zekthul slammed his fist on the command console. The metal bent under the force of his blow. "We do not retreat from ghosts and memories. My forces have conquered a dozen star systems. We will not be defeated by empty ships and parlor tricks." The truth was that Zekthul's pride had been wounded beyond healing. His people were warriors who valued strength above all else. To be defeated without even seeing their enemy was unthinkable. "Sir," the sensor officer called out, "we are receiving another transmission from the human vessels." "Ignore it," Zekthul commanded. "I have heard enough of their threats." But the transmission came through anyway. overriding their communication systems as if their technology belonged to the humans. Not to them. Commander Zekthol of the Hegemony, the voice said, speaking his name with perfect pronunciation. We know who you are. We know your history, your victories, your defeats. You were at the Battle of Crimson Nebula. You led the siege of Fortress Prime. You are a warrior of skill and honor. The bridge fell silent. The human voice continued. We do not wish to add your name to the list of those who fell because of pride. Withdraw your forces. Return to your people. Tell them that humanity has returned, but we seek no conquest. This is your final warning. The transmission ended, but its message burned in Zekthol's mind. How did they know his battle history? Those records were classified at the highest levels. Analysis, he commanded his science officer. Sir, the transmission came from everywhere and nowhere. It did not originate from any single source. It was as if the entire human territory spoke with one voice. Zekthol made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. If these humans thought they could intimidate him with their advanced technology, they would learn otherwise. He would show them the price of threatening the hegemony. Prepare the fleet for bombardment of Earth, he ordered. Sir? Brechtal stepped forward. Surely you cannot mean to attack their homeworld? They want to play games with us? Fine. But when their precious homeworld burns, we will see how long their arrogance lasts. The order went out to the hegemony fleet. 50 warships moved into position around Earth, their weapons charging for planetary bombardment. Each ship carried enough firepower to crack a continent. Together, they could reduce the planet to molten rock. Sir, the weapons officer reported. All ships report ready. Targeting systems locked on major population centers. Zekthol looked at the blue planet on his view screen. Somewhere down there were the answers to all his questions. The source of the technology that had humiliated his forces. He would destroy it all. Fire, he commanded. Nothing happened. Sir, the weapons officer called out, panic in his voice. The weapons are not responding. None of them. All systems show green, but the guns will not fire. What? Zekthol rushed to the weapons console. Every indicator showed that the systems were operational, but when he tried to manually fire the guns, nothing happened. Sir, the sensor officer announced, I am reading massive energy spikes throughout the solar system. Something very large is approaching. On the main screen, space itself began to ripple like water. The effect spread outward from points near each of the major planets, growing larger and more pronounced. Sir, the science officer reported, his voice filled with awe. Space is being folded. Something is using gravitational manipulation on a scale I have never seen. Then they appeared. Ships emerged from the folded space around Earth. But calling them ships was like calling a mountain a pebble. These vessels were vast beyond comprehension, some as large as small moons. Their hulls were smooth and organic-looking, as if they had been grown rather than built. Count them, Zekthol whispered. Sir, I am reading 12. No, 15. Sir, they keep appearing. I count at least 30 major vessels, with hundreds of smaller craft. The human ships moved with impossible grace for their size, positioning themselves between the hegemony fleet and Earth. They made no threatening moves, but their mere presence was overwhelming. Sir, the communications officer reported, we are being scanned. But sir, this is not like the other scans. This one is looking inside our minds. Zekthol felt it then, a presence touching the edges of his thoughts. Not invading, not forcing, just gently examining. He tried to resist, but it was like trying to stop the wind. Then the presence spoke, not through the ship's communication system, but directly into his mind. Commander Zekthol, your thoughts betray your fear, but also your honor. You attack because you believe it is what a warrior should do. We understand. Images filled his mind. He saw the human ships not as threats, but as they truly were. Each vessel was alive in some way, crewed by beings that had once been human, but were now something more. They existed partially in normal space, and partially in dimensions he could not understand. We left the galaxy because we were becoming something that would terrify other species, the voice continued. We spent 300 years learning to control our growth, to become teachers instead of conquerors. But some lessons can only be taught through demonstration. Zekthul felt his consciousness being lifted, expanded. Suddenly, he could see the galaxy as the humans saw it. Not just the 3 dimensions he knew, but 7 others folded within them. He could perceive time not as a straight line, but as a vast web of possibility. In this expanded awareness, he understood what humanity had become. They had not simply advanced their technology. They had evolved beyond the normal limits of matter and energy. They existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, their consciousness linked across space and time. We could have destroyed your fleet before you fired a single shot, the voice explained. But destruction teaches nothing. Instead, we offer you a choice. The vision changed. Zekthul saw his own people, the hegemony, not as conquerors, but as children taking their first steps into a larger universe. He saw their potential, their ability to grow and learn. Join us, the human voice offered. Not as subjects, but as students. Learn what we have learned. Become more than you are. Around him, Zekthul's crew was experiencing their own visions. Some cried out in fear, others in wonder. A few fell to their knees, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they were seeing. But not all of his officers were affected the same way. Some, like Colonel Brechtal, seemed to welcome the experience. Their faces showed understanding, acceptance, and something that looked like joy. Sir, Brechtal said softly, I can see it. I can see what we could become. Other crew members were changing before Zekthul's eyes. Not physically, but in some deeper way. Their eyes held new depths, new understanding. They were being offered the chance to evolve, to join humanity's journey beyond normal existence. The choice is yours, the human voice said. Accept our gift and grow beyond what you are. Or remain as you were and return to your people with a message. Zekthul felt the offer like a warm current in his mind. He could join them, become part of something magnificent and terrible. But that would mean leaving behind everything he had ever known. What kind of message? He asked aloud. That humanity has returned, not as conquerors, but as gardeners. We will tend the growth of younger species, protect them from threats they cannot handle, and offer guidance when they are ready. Some of his crew chose to accept the transformation. Zekthul watched as they became something more than they had been, their bodies changing to accommodate new ways of thinking and being. Others, including Zekthul himself, chose to remain unchanged. The humans respected this choice without judgment. Your fleet is free to leave, the voice said. Your weapons will function normally once you are beyond our territory. Tell your leaders what you have seen. Tell them that humanity offers partnership to those ready for it, and protection to those who are not. As the hegemony fleet prepared to depart, Zekthul looked back at Earth. The human ships had not moved to attack or pursue. They simply watched, waiting to see what the galaxy would do with the knowledge of their return. Sir, his navigation officer asked, course setting? Oh, Zekthul said quietly. We have a message to deliver. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so quiet. Representatives from hundreds of species sat in their floating chairs, all eyes focused on the 3 beings who stood at the center of the great hall. They looked human but changed. Taller than the humans of old, with eyes that seemed to hold depths beyond normal space. Their skin had a faint luminous quality, as if light moved beneath the surface. When they moved, it was with perfect grace, as if they were dancing to music only they could hear. Commander Zek Thol had delivered his report 3 days earlier. His words had shaken the galaxy to its core. The humans had returned, but they were no longer the species that had left 3 centuries ago. They had become something beyond normal understanding. Ambassador Veltar spoke first, his voice trembling slightly. Council members, we are honored by the presence of the human delegation. Admiral Chun 9947, thank you for accepting our invitation. The human who had been introduced as Admiral Chun 9947 stepped forward. When she spoke, her voice seemed to come from multiple directions at once, as if several people were speaking in perfect harmony. Council members, we thank you for this gathering. We know our return has caused concern throughout the galaxy. We are here to explain our intentions and answer your questions. Elder Kristen, whose tree-like people were among the oldest in the galaxy, rustled his leaves nervously. Admiral, Commander Zekthal has told us of your abilities. Your technology is beyond our understanding. What do you want from us? Admiral Chum 9947's expression was patient, almost maternal. We want nothing from you. We offer only what you are ready to receive: understanding, guidance, protection when needed. Protection from what? Asked Dr. Malik from the Crystal Collective. From the darkness that lies beyond this galaxy, Admiral Chun 9947 replied. From forces that would consume entire star systems without thought. From the mistakes that young civilizations make when they reach for power they cannot control. She gestured, and the air above the council chamber filled with images. Stars dying in impossible ways. Worlds torn apart by weapons that rewrote the laws of physics. Entire regions of space where reality itself had been broken. The universe is vast and filled with dangers, the Admiral continued. We learned this during our journey beyond the galactic rim. We encountered things that nearly destroyed us. Beings of such power that they could remake matter with a thought. Entities that fed on civilizations, growing stronger with each species they consumed. The council members watched in horror as the images showed the destruction of worlds they could not even imagine. Entire solar systems reduced to twisted wreckage. Species fleeing in terror from forces beyond comprehension. But we also learned how to fight such things, Admiral Chun 9947 said, and the images changed. Now they showed human ships, larger than anything the galaxy had ever seen, battling creatures made of living energy. Humans working together to heal damaged space-time, to restore broken worlds. This is why we left, she explained. Not because we were defeated, but because we needed to grow. To become strong enough to protect not just ourselves, but others. To learn wisdom that would match our power. A young representative from the Spiral Arms Federation raised a tentacle. But why should we trust you? How do we know you will not simply conquer us, as others have tried? Admiral Chun 9947 smiled, and for a moment she looked almost like the humans of old. Because conquest would serve no purpose. We have moved beyond the need for territory or resources. Our ships create what they need from the base elements of space itself. Our people exist partially outside normal time, so we are in no hurry to claim anything. She paused, looking around the chamber. But more than that, conquest would prevent us from achieving our true goal, which is, Ambassador Voltar asked, to see every species in this galaxy reach its full potential. To watch as you discover new ways of thinking, new approaches to existence that even we have not imagined. Conquest would end that diversity, force everyone to become like us. That would be a tragedy beyond measure. Commander Zekthol, who had been silent throughout the discussion, finally spoke. Admiral, some of my crew chose to join you. They became something more than they were. What happened to them? They began the journey we began 3 centuries ago, she replied. They are learning to exist in multiple dimensions, to perceive reality in new ways. But they are still themselves, still your people. They have simply become more than they were. And if others wish to make that choice, the offer is always open. But it must be freely chosen, never forced. Some species are ready for such transformation. Others need more time to grow in their own way. Both paths have value. A small creature with large eyes spoke up from near the back of the chamber. What about those who wish no contact with you at all? Then they will be left in peace. Admiral Chun 9947 said simply, "The galaxy is vast enough for many different approaches to existence. We will protect such species from outside threats, but we will not interfere with their chosen path." The questions continued for hours. The human delegation answered each one with patience and wisdom that seemed to come from centuries of experience. They spoke of their plans to establish guardian stations at the edge of the galaxy, watching for threats from beyond. They described their intention to offer advanced technology to species ready for it, while respecting the chosen limitations of others. As the session drew to a close, Elder Kristen asked a question that had been on everyone's mind. "Admiral, what if we had not disturbed your territories? What if we had heeded your warning and left your worlds alone?" Admiral Chun 9947 was quiet for a long moment. "Then we might have slept for another 1,000 years, growing stronger but more distant from the galaxy we once knew. Commander Zekthul's decision to enter our space forced us to return before we were completely ready. In a way, we owe him our thanks." She turned to look at the hegemony commander. "Your actions reminded us that isolation has its own dangers. We were becoming so advanced that we risked losing touch with other forms of life entirely. Your invasion taught us that we needed to return and engage with the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as teachers and protectors." As the council session ended, the human delegation did not simply leave. Instead, they seemed to fade, becoming less solid until they were only impressions of light and thought. Then they were gone, though their presence could still be felt somehow. In the days that followed, reports came in from across the galaxy. Human installations that had been hidden were revealing themselves, not as military bases, but as research centers and gardens. Worlds that had seemed empty were showing signs of life again, but not the humans of old. These were new beings, evolved beyond normal matter, tending to impossible forests and cities that existed in multiple dimensions. The galaxy began to change in subtle ways. Ships that broke down in deep space found themselves mysteriously repaired. Planets threatened by natural disasters received help from sources that appeared and vanished without explanation. Aggressive species that had terrorized their neighbors found their weapons failing whenever they tried to attack the innocent. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the different species began to see themselves. The knowledge that humanity had voluntarily given up an empire to pursue wisdom and growth inspired others to question their own goals. Some species began to focus less on expansion and more on understanding. Others started cooperation programs that would have been impossible before. The galaxy had been given an example of what it meant to use power responsibly. Commander Zekthul returned to hegemony space a changed being. Not transformed like some of his crew, but carrying within him the memory of seeing existence from a human perspective. He began to advocate for peaceful exploration rather than conquest, for learning rather than taking. Many in the hegemony called him weak, but others listened. They remembered the stories of the human fleet that could have destroyed them all, but chose instead to offer wisdom. In the depths of space, ancient watchers took note of what had happened. Beings that had observed the galaxy for millions of years recorded the return of humanity with something approaching hope. Perhaps this young galaxy was finally beginning to mature. Perhaps it was developing the wisdom needed to survive the challenges that lay ahead in the vast Dangerous universe. On Earth, in the restored cities that now existed partially outside normal space-time, human children played in gardens that grew in 7 dimensions. They were learning to be the next generation of guardians, beings who would protect and guide the galaxy through the long journey ahead. The warning had been fulfilled. Humanity's empire was indeed gone. In its place was something far more powerful and infinitely more precious. A species that had learned to use its strength in service of others. The galaxy would never be the same. But perhaps, for the first time in its long history, it had a chance to become something truly magnificent.